Hello and welcome to the podcast. I'm your host Amit Kirti. In this podcast, I will talk about the Indian Agrarian Crisis. Particularly, we will be looking at the production side of the issue. Bloomberg ran an interesting article on the Indian farmers. Author Shamika Ravi looks at the numbers from National Crime Records Bureau and concludes that over the past 16 years since 2000, the annual death due to farmer suicide has been coming down as shown in the figure on the left hand side. The graph on the right hand side shows that the deaths are prevalent more in rich states like Maharashtra and Andhra Pradesh compared to relatively less well off states like Bihar and Uttar Pradesh. This leads to an inference that the deaths may not be due to poverty or debt alone. The author concludes the following. Debt is not the only reason for the suicides seen in farmers. The reason for farmer suicide could also be the following. It could be due to family problems and illness. It could also be local issues that may need local solutions rather than blanket solutions like farm loan waivers. As a passing remark, the author quote an important finding from National Sample Survey Office reports which state that nearly 90% of the farmers who commit suicide in Maharashtra had more than 2 acres of land, and 6 out of 10 farmers owned more than 4 acres of land. So, it looks like farmers with more than 2 acres and many farmers with more than 4 acres of land are committing suicide. That is an important observation that deserves more attention. Dr. Andrew Foster from the Brown University and Dr. Mark Rosenzweig from the Yale University did a study titled Are There Too Many Farms in the World? Labor Market Transaction Costs, Machine Capacities, and Optimal Farm Size. The results of the study were published in October of 2017. Authors looked at the India specific data provided by ICRISAT, which is an international non-profit organization. Authors looked at the data that spanned close to 10 years. The results are very interesting and they touch upon the core issue on why Indian farmers suffer. In rich countries like US and Canada, less than 10% of farmers have farm size of less than 10 acres, which means that 90% of the farmers have very large farms. Whereas in developing countries like India, close to 80% of farmers have less than 10 acres of land. The first outcome, rich countries do large scale farming. The second outcome from the study was rich countries have higher yields per hectare compared to developing countries. Outcome 2, large farmlands equal to higher yields. Note that China is an anomaly here because China uses abnormally high amounts of fertilizers in their farms, which results in slightly better yields. There was a study specifically for India which shows the following. Farmers with less than 2 acres get better returns per acre of their land, which is seen in the graph on the left hand side. Farmers with 2 to 12 acres are the worst affected, who get least returns per acre of their land. Farmers with more than 12 acres are able to realize higher profits. So the farmers with very small land and very large land have seen better returns per acre. It is the middle class farmers seem to be the ones that are most impacted. This seems to corroborate the findings from the Bloomberg article as well. Now it dwells further on the reasons. So let us first look at the farmers who have less than 2 acres of land. These farmers have tiny land that can be managed by the farmer himself. Farmer farms the land and grows crops leading to lower cost per acre. This results in decent returns for the marginal farmer. Now, in case of farmers with 2 to 10 acres of land, farmer alone cannot manage the land. So the farmer ends up hiring outside labor. Now, the labor charges daily wages in India, but it works less than 8 hours or 10 hours specified per day because of time lost in other things like transportation, for where the labor has to come from his house all the way to the farms which are probably away from their home. This results in lesser amount of work being done on the land. The farmer cannot do mechanized farming as it turns out to be expensive. Both these factors result in the cost of farming exceeding the selling price for the produce. In case of farmers that have more than 10 acres of land, farmers generally opt for machines to do their farming. This substantially reduces the labor cost, which is a sizable cost for any farmer. This leads to higher profits per acre of land for farmers with larger farmlands. In conclusion, the graph on the left shows the labor cost per acre, and we can see that farms that have 2 to 10 acres bear the highest labor cost per acre, and that generally cripples the farmer. So, the following conclusions can be drawn from the article. If Indian farmers have to progress, then the following is needed. Step 1: increase farmland size by some means. For example, the farmers could do collective farming. Second step: use machines on these increased farmlands to reduce the labor cost. Now, the study has some limitations. The study looks only at the production side. Indian farmers face much bigger issues post harvesting. For example, not receiving the minimum support price for their crops. Sometimes they don't even receive their dues post the harvest. So they end up giving all their farm produce to the middleman and he doesn't pay them back in time. Loss of harvested crops due to lack of warehousing. Farmer ends up keeping his produce in some places which are not protected, which could lead to pest and rodent attacks. Lack of options to sell beyond their local market. For example, farmers as of today do not have the luxury or freedom or the permission from government to sell their produce online. Nevertheless, the study points out to interesting results from real life data. India should look for some kind of collective farming by pooling in farmlands and using machines to farm. Thanks for listening. Goodbye till we meet again in our next podcast.